sun rises over a country which boasts of romance and intrigue, where man tests his macho, his bravery, whenever opportunity knocks. The Matador, his success is measured in inches. Come too close, and the results? Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. The beast has won this round. Only 50 miles away, the annual running of the bulls, where for 3 days any man can test himself in his own street. It's a Spaniard's birthright. Now the romance and intrigue have come to Jerez. It's not far from the beautiful Costa del Sol, where the Spaniards have built a brand new arena in an effort to contain another beast, 1,000 horsepower of Grand Prix engine. Hello, I'm Jackie Stewart. Welcome to this pre-race Grand Prix report. Well, as you can see from those pretty ladies, we're in Spain. We're in Jerez. This is the capital of the sherry-growing part of the world. Every year, 14 million cases of sherry are produced here by only about 130,000 people of population and about 120,000 acres. It's not a big area for a motor race in normal terms, but this is where the Grand Prix of Spain is going to take place this year. It's the first race of the calendar season in the European arena. We're going to see some exciting racing simply because this is a brand new racetrack. At the cost of about $10 million without the cost of land, they've put this up here in Jerez. It's going to be fresh for the drivers and the teams. The engines, they don't know what the performance is going to be. They don't know how well the car's going to handle, how they're going to marry the car to the track, because nobody has seen any more than just a plan of the racetrack. We'll be right back for the Grand Prix of Spain. This Grand Prix report is brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? Welcome back to this pre-race report. As in last year's coverage of ESPN's motor racing activities, John Bisignano is going to be working yet again with us. He's been looking at what happens when you come to a new track.
It's actually quite unusual for the Formula One fraternity to come to a new circuit. And when they do, they must learn where the best hotels are and even the fastest way to the track. But the drivers have a more serious responsibility to learn the layout of the new track like the back of their hand. They must be able to predict what the car is going to do in every situation. We asked Stefan Johansson how he handles this problem.
Normally I drive around it in a rent car if it's possible, but I also like to walk around it 1 or 2 laps because you pick up things. You know, you have to, when you look at the entrance to a corner or something, you can't normally see it very well in a rent car because you sit so high. You got to sit down and just sort of. But even so, I mean, there's so much you can see by walking around the place. I mean, the only way you really feel is when you get in the race car.
Now, after the driver feels totally secure on the circuit, his next duty is one of communications. What he has to do is communicate on how he feels the team can adjust the car to grasp that last tenth of a second. We talked to Patrick Head, chief designer of the Williams team, about this problem.
Well, we get some idea of the circuit before we come here because we get a circuit map quite well in advance, which we know the radiuses of the corners and the lengths of the straights. And over the years, we've been developing a program for predicting the performance of the cars around the circuit. So we've got some a little bit helping us in our initial guesses, and recently they've been proving fairly close. So this circuit particularly, we've never been to before. We've got no data from any previous races racing that's happened here at all. We thought it might be fairly heavy on brakes, and it's got a mixture of very, very tight corners and one or two corners that are a bit faster than we expected. So we can vary spring settings, wing settings, roll bar settings, ride heights of the car, a number of things. There's also a very big factor this year, which is fuel consumption, in that we've got to complete the race with no more than 95 liters, which is about 56 US gallons, and various settings on the car can affect the rate at which we use fuel. So it's another factor that we've got to be actually setting to get the optimum for the race.
Now, even after many miles of testing and qualifying, once the green light comes on, these cars and teams and drivers are going to be moving into new territory. Jackie, Stefan Johansson, 10 laps to learn a new circuit. That's pretty quick for anyone.
Well, John, in fact, it would probably take me no less than about 20 to 30 laps to feel totally comfortable on visiting a new track. So young Mr. Johansson has got quite a lot on his plate, I think. I'll be right back with Larry Nuber after this. This pre-race report has been brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Buenos dias de Jerez de Jerez. Good afternoon, everyone, from the circuit near Jerez in Spain. Not only are we near the land of fermentation, but also very close, less than 100 kilometers from one of the most historic landmarks in the history of the world, the Rock of Gibraltar at the entrance to the Mediterranean. The weather here, Jackie, in Spain, a marked contrast to what we saw in Rio.
It has been abnormally cool for this time of year for Spain here. We would normally expect temperatures of about 27 degrees centigrade, which would have turned out to be roughly the same as was in Brazil in an overcast day, as you may remember by watching ESPN. So I think that's going to help us probably mechanically. I think it's going to be a more reliable race.
Well, talking about rock, some of those solid racers are back up the top again. There seems to be a pattern developing. Now we've got Mansell and Senna near the front again. Do you expect a replay of what happened at Rio?
These two drivers have come together quite heavily in more than one Grand Prix, and if you do recall from Rio, they had a first lap accident where Mansell went off the road. It could have cost them the race. I hope they've learned from that, particularly Mansell. I think there's going to be basically 5 drivers up front. 2 from the Williams team, Piquet and Mansell, could do well. Then the McLaren team of Keke Rosberg and Alain Prost, I think, are going to be very competitive here. And one other driver would be Ayrton Senna.
Well, also joining us in the broadcast today will be John Bisignano, and John is out on the course at one of the most critical areas on this circuit.
Now, most of the drivers have been extremely complimentary about this Jerez circuit. But one problem that really didn't show up until they began to run here has been dearly named the horrible Jerez hump. And this is it, a simple joining of 2 surfaces in the road. It may look quite smooth to you, but in 4th gear at well over 100 miles an hour, it's been causing some real problems. 2 things. First of all, the chassis goes extremely light. You can see where it actually bangs down on the surface about 3 feet from the hump. And then again, second touchdown, about 20 feet away. The second problem is that the engine, in just a millisecond of the chassis going light, can gain a good 2,000 RPM. Now, that's cost one team 4 motors. Very expensive thing. What they've tried to do to solve that is put in a longer 4th gear. This means that they can hit the hump at, say, 10,000 RPM, gain their 2,000, and still be under red line. The problem is that 4th gear virtually works nowhere else on the circuit.
Thank you, John. Now, keep in mind that most of these Grand Prix cars have got 6-speed gearboxes, but the Brabham team, in fact, have a 7-speed gearbox. Very unusual in road racing. Now, let's have a look at the starting grid. So on the pole, Ayrton Senna, 2 out of 2. He was fastest in Rio, he's fastest here. Nelson Piquet, also of Brazil, is 2nd fastest. Nigel Mansell, his teammate, is in 3rd fastest time, with Alain Prost, the reigning world champion, he's in 4th fastest time. Keke Rosberg, his teammate, making up the 5. Then René Arnoux of France, 6th fastest. Gerhard Berger of Austria is 7th. Jacques Lafitte of France is 8th. Teo Fabi of Italy, driving the Benetton, is 9th. Johnny Dumfries, the young Scotsman, is 10th. Stefan Johansson, 11th. Martin Brundle, Alboreto, Patrese, De Angelis, Jonathan Palmer, Alan Jones from Australia, Patrick Tamby, his teammate, Terry Boutsen, Streff, Ginzani, Sura, Dana, De Cesaris, and right on the back, Nannini. We'll be back for the start of the Grand Prix of Spain after this. The Grand Prix of Spain is being brought to you by Budweiser, Beechwood aged for that clean, crisp taste. This Bud's for you. By Honda Motorcycles, Honda, follow the leader. By BF Goodrich TA radios, built for you to take on the road.
Welcome back to the Spanish Grand Prix, transmitting across the Atlantic. We apologize, we did have some audio problems, but video was fine, and we can give you now a look at the start of this exciting race.
Of that race was not without its troubles. Even on the very first lap, we had 3 cars drop out. The first one was with Jonathan Palmer and Alan Jones halfway around the racetrack. They came together and crashed, taking both cars out. And then Nannini came into the pits at the end of the first lap with transmission trouble. De Cesaris had also transmission trouble, the very same teammate. And then on lap 10, Ginzani, he had a turbocharger go wrong. And then Stefan Johansson on the 10th lap, he went off the road, hit some tires, got badly bruised on his chest, but he got out of the car, and when he stepped on terra firma, when he stepped on the ground, suddenly he keeled over, seemed to become unconscious. They had to take him away in a stretcher, took him to the medical center, found that he had nothing more serious than badly bruised chest, and that was okay. Now, let's take the story of this race up on lap 14.
Of Spain, and we are 14 laps into the race, and really not much has changed up front since the green light flashed on. Ayrton Senna sat on the pole for the second time in a row in a Grand Prix. He has led every lap since then. He has been chased by 2 or 3 other teams. We've had a couple of crashes, but not much yet, Jackie, that has shown us how this race is going to go.
Well, we've had quite a few incidents. Certainly, Senna's led comfortably from the beginning. Piquet has been in second place, but third place was originally held by Nigel Mansell, who was then passed by Keke Rosberg to take over third position. Mansell was then passed also by Alain Prost, and the car that you see reversing into the medical center there is an ambulance, because Stefan Johansson has had a coming together with Streff, and Johansson was put on a stretcher to be taken back to the medical center to be found out how he is. He did get out of the car in his own power, and then he keeled over onto the sand, and in fact he's now going back for that checkup. So the medical center is being used. Professor Watkins, the neurosurgeon on parade, who comes to every Grand Prix. But that's Ayrton Senna that you're looking at right now if you're receiving transmission from it. Alan Jones and Jonathan Palmer came into contact with each other. They crashed. Both of them are out. None of them are injured. Then we had the Johansson crash. Then Patrick Tamby has been in the pits with brake trouble. Patrese came in contact with the barrier, again without any injury. Nannini is out. De Cesaris is out. They are all out of the race. The pace of the race, I would have to say, is cautious. At the present time, the fastest lap has been put up by Keke Rosberg at a time considerably slower, about 9 seconds a lap slower than the pole position set by Ayrton Senna. Senna has been given a little bit of pressure by his countryman, Nelson Piquet, who's driving, of course, the Honda-engined Williams car. Frank Williams, the owner of the Williams team, still paralyzed in a London hospital following following a road accident that he had some 5 or 6 weeks ago. The McLaren team glued together in hot competition. The speculation for this race is that the Renault engine cars are going to be slightly tighter on fuel, and therefore Senna is probably pacing himself based on fuel consumption, but going fast enough to keep ahead of Nelson Piquet. Another car comes into the pits there.
That's Christian Danner who was pulled in. Christian Danner, the young driver who came out of the ranks of Formula 3 racing, Formula 3000 racing, a year ago, to move over to the Ocella team. This is the Circuito de Jerez, the Circuit Permanente at Jerez. As we told you earlier, we are, less than 100 kilometers from the Mediterranean Sea, not too far from the Rock of Gibraltar, as a matter of fact. This is a brand new course as we go back to look at Christian Danner, who has come into the pits again. This is a brand new facility. So new, as a matter of fact, that when we arrived on Thursday, the road out front was not even completed yet. It's very modern. It's very comfortable. It looks nice. The curbing that you see there is blue and white. It's different from most of the curbing that you Americans are expected to find. The curbing, it's almost like an upside-down Venetian blind. It's blue and white, and it's also very upsetting to the cars. The curbing here is something special. It's something that you have to make an effort to avoid.
So Ayrton Senna coming up behind one of the back markers. He's going to pull over. The blue flag is being thrown. When that car simply didn't see him. He simply didn't see him. Now there is a set of circumstances that could take a leader out of a race without any trouble. That is a problem. So Ayrton Senna got through that. Even though the flag marshal was waving the blue, the other driver simply didn't see what was going on. Now, the only thing that's wrong with this brand new racetrack is that there's no people to see the race. In Spain, historically, there's never had a great following of crowds attending races, whether they be held in Madrid. And there you see a replay of that very close situation. It looked like one of the Minardi cars, in fact, but both of them have been in the pit. And we've got a report that they, in fact, were totally out.
I think it might have been a Benetton car. It looked a little bit, it was difficult to tell because the sun was shining right on top of that car at that point. That was on, it was the Brabham, the number 7 car. Riccardo Patrese was the one who was involved in that incident. No, it was, now we're getting a report that it was Elio. It was Elio, the number 8 Brabham, Elio De Angelis, who was the one involved in that incident with Ayrton Senna. Remember that we saw one of the Brabhams drop out of the race a little earlier.
Well, he had an accident. In fact, Patrese had an accident. And the gearbox seemed to be, not a crash, it was the gearbox, but he rolled it against the barrier. So he's in okay shape. And Senna certainly seems to have opened up something there. Where is Piquet? Piquet's there. He's all right.
Back, both. And it looks like the Manzo in the number 5 Williams got underneath Alain Prost and has moved into 3rd just on that last turn. Looks like Manzo moved underneath.
I think Rosberg's still in 3rd position. And there you see a little move on this replay here, and Nigel Mansell does pass Alain Prost, so that gets him into 4th position. 4th position for Nigel Mansell, and we'll be right back after this. We're back at the Tio Pepe Grand Prix of Spain. The leader is still Ayrton Senna, followed by Nelson Piquet. 3rd is Keke Rosberg. 4 is Nigel Mansell. 5th is Alain Prost. And that has been a change. Just before we went to commercial there, Alain Prost got passed by Nigel in a little fit of exuberance. It'll be interesting now to see if he turns up his boost just a wee bit more and tries to get Rosberg. And that, you see there, is one of the back markers. That was not René Arnoux. But René Arnoux is behind there with Jacques Lafitte in the other Ligier. The car on your left-hand side of the screen there, sitting up on the stand, was that of Alan Jones, spun out in contact with one of the Tyrrell cars, the Data General cars, but he's okay.
In regards to the fuel situation, these cars will have to obtain 3.7 miles per gallon. Again, those are in American terms. Obviously, we talk more in terms of liters when we're doing a Formula 1 race. But the cars today will have to average 3.7 miles per gallon to go the entire entire distance, 191 miles without stopping. You probably know, those of you who are Americans watching this race, that is considerably further than Indianapolis car can go. Those cars only getting about 1.8 miles per gallon. So, as Jackie mentioned, the boost in how the driver controls that up and down during the race may have a lot to do with the outcome of this event. And I remind you that Alain Prost is one of the very best in controlling himself in those types of situations.
Incidentally, this race has been a little bit of a celebration for Lotus because by getting the pole position, Ayrton Senna put the total number of pole positions to 100, gained by Lotus over their history in Grand Prix racing. Ferrari are the only team who have done better than them at 103. 103 pole positions for Ferrari, 100, and that's just a fresh title today. Then a big gap right down to Brabham, down to 39 for Brabham, 31 for Renault, and McLaren's had 23. So that's a pretty impressive title for Lotus to have gained because, of course, they've been in racing a lot less in the way of years and time than Ferrari.
Yeah, Ferrari was around at the very beginning, the modern era of Formula One racing in 1950. By the way, some very good news from the track hospital on Stefan Johansson. It's unofficial, but we believe, at least the initial report coming out of the hospital, a bruised chest. So if that is the only case, things are good.
It may be that bruised chest may have come, in fact, from his own seatbelts. Here is Patrick Tambay, who was in having brake adjustments done in the pits earlier. The blue flag has been shown to Patrick Tambay. He's a driver of considerable experience. I suspect he will move over at the appropriate moment and let the yellow helmeted black car of Ayrton Senna through. Right now he's standing on it pretty heavily. And of course they're using the Hart engine and the Haas entered car for this. And there he goes. There's Senna. He moved over. And Senna again locking that. Senna locking that brake a little bit again. It's just the inside unloaded wheel. In fact, it's quite often the sign of a very good driver when he's in a position to do that. The only danger is that you can what they call flat a tire. That's to say, you can put the brakes on, and we see them now going on maybe in that slow motion move there, but they've passed it. The flat spot develops when the tire is worn while it's locked, and it will go flat, and then there'll be a vibration through the car for the remainder of the race, which of course doesn't help them in braking.
And let's re-emphasize, they don't expect to stop at all in this race. Nobody knows for sure, but the tire engineers and the people with their calculators who are trying to come up with the fuel formulas, they think they can go the distance without stopping. There is only one place on this course, it's about halfway through, where there's a problem on the track in terms of upsetting the race car to the point where it's causing damage to the machine. One team lost 4 engines this week because of a bump on the racetrack about halfway around the course, not too far from the chicane.
One of the main issues here is transmission also. When you're producing no less than 750 brake horsepower and up in qualifying to even 1100 horsepower, there's been quite a few transmission problems. And this is why, incidentally, Nigel Mansell says that he is prepared to change gear 38 times in comparison to Alain Prost's 22 times of gear changing per lap. The reason for that is that he feels that he should, when he goes down the box, go from 6th to 5th to 4th to 3rd to 2nd, rather than jumping from 6th into 2nd gear because it's quieter on the transmission. He feels that he's got much more chance of reliability in that respect, so therefore he's choosing to do a lot more physical work in that area.
16 turns, 10 right-handers, and 6 left-handers. This is the back section of the racetrack. We're coming down behind the pits, getting toward the main straightaway, around turn number 16, and down the front stretch. The Spanish Grand Prix, another competitor's pulled off. Looks like it may have been a Benetton car, a blue helmet. If so, that would make it Gerhard Berger. But we will be back with more from the Spanish Grand Prix. There's still a lot to come. Has as the natives say here in Spain, or Jerez if we were back in America. That is Ayrton Senna. He has dominated practice, dominated qualifying, and dominated the race so far. This course, by the way, the terrain here near Jerez, if you're familiar with Laguna Seca back in the States, you get that feeling as you sit here. There are big hills that surround this racetrack. Unlike Laguna Seca, the course does not go uphill and downhill, but you have that feeling as you're right here like you're near Monterey. The course in some respects reminds me a little bit of Portland in that there are not very many long straightaways, a lot of short, narrow, decreasing radius corners, and in some respects it smacks like what we Americans would call a little bull ring, but it's a good racetrack for Formula One racers at the driver's track.
Well, we have another car. That's the Benetton car that's parked there just past the start-finishing line. Our Spanish friends are staying very closely on the leader here. We're not getting much of what's going on in the back of the field, but let me run down the order as we see it at the present time. We have Senna, Piquet, Rosberg, Mansell, then Prost, then Arnoux and Lafitte, then Berger. Then we come down to Brundle. Martin Brundle and the Data General come up now to 9th position very nicely. Johnny Dumfries, the young Scot driving the JPS Lotus, is in 10th. Then Terry Boutsen with the US F&G Arrow car. Mark Surer, his man up there with him in 12th position. Then Alboretos in 14th as one of the Ligiers come in. Now they're in Pirelli. Now that's René Arnoux, who was firmly there in 6th position, and he's come in. They're working at the engine. They're not changing the tires. We've had one of the Pirelli runners in. One of the Brabham cars came in for tires. He had a tire change because he said that the racetrack had a lot of oil on it. Now, the reason that it had a lot of oil on it, I have to point out, is that I understand that the Renaults have been going through an oil consumption problem here. They experienced it more vehemently this morning, and I think a few people have filled up the oil tanks just a wee bit too full to accommodate the additional use of oil, because they cannot add oil after the race has started. So I think some of that oil has spewed out onto the racetrack, because when he did come in for a stop, his front end of the car was completely covered with oil. That was De Angelis.
Yeah, it was. Matter of fact, we were trying to figure out, Jackie, who that car was. We said with the sun shining in, it was difficult to tell the colors, and the reason being it was looking like a blue and gold car, which of course there is no such thing, and that's why it was difficult to tell that Brabham. We also have now a report that Alboreto, whom we saw coming into the pits a few minutes ago, they were changing rubber, but that was only precautionary. It was a brake problem. Michele Alboreto, the other Ferrari crashing, so this will not be a successful weekend for the Ferraris. And another thing about those about the Renaults, if indeed that is the situation, it's going to make them just a little more tricky to pass, too.
Well, I think that the cars having most of the trouble, in fact, with the Tyrrells, they thought that it may be a problem of their breather in their tank, but they haven't changed it at all, and they're still using the old car, because yesterday Martin Brundle had quite a big accident, clearly without any damage to himself, because right now as we speak to you, he's got himself into 8th position, but he wrote off the brand new Tyrrell car, the Data General car. This was his first race appearance, which was rather disappointing, so he's driving one of the older cars. So that's where he is right now. He's in 9th position, 8th position, I beg your pardon, which is a very respectable performance. Now, just as we were looking there, you saw a lot of very empty grandstands, as I said earlier, and then you can see them on the right-hand side of your screen. This new racetrack is not known to anyone. There's been no promotional activities associated with this, and frankly, I don't think there can be 15,000 people at this whole event. Maybe 20,000 people maximum, because it's 2.6 miles around. They've got a lot of bleacher area, but not very much of it being used.
The track financed primarily by the sherry industry, which is so big around here. The brochures advertised 40,000 permanent seats. It was interesting, they also were heavily into the promotion of 60,000 standing room only opportunities. That was part of the advertised capacity of this facility, 100,000, but 60,000 of it was standing room only, 40,000 permanent seats.
Well, Keke Rosberg's getting a little closer there to the second place man Nelson Piquet, as we found that René Arnoux problem is an electrical problem, and there you see him in your picture right now, not a happy man. And Michele Alboreto is out. His Ferrari is out, so that means that both of the prancing horses are not going to be kicking their heels in the wind today. So that's a problem for Ferrari. Not a very good performance by them.
Well, the minimum ticket price, going back talking about how unsuccessful the promoters of this event were in attracting people, was 35, what is that, pounds there, Jackie? Was the equivalent of $105 to sit in the main grandstand here, the paddock, along the front stretch. It's a pretty high ticket item for a country like Spain that does not have as much affluence as some place like America or even England for that matter.
Well, certainly in this part of the country, there's only a population of about 130,000 people down here. They're mainly from agriculture, from working in the fields, really. It's not an industrial area, so therefore the people are reasonably poor, if you like to put it that way. They live from the land. So from Spain and the Spanish Grand Prix, we'll be back.
Grand Prix of Spain. Jackie, it's been a couple of years since we were here. It's a country that has not found it able to host a Formula One race every year since 1950. They started racing here back in 1913, a long time ago, but because of all the political and social upheavals, they haven't been able to keep a continuous strand of races here.
Well, it's been 5 years, and incidentally, Nigel Mansell, I think, has just outdone Keke Rosberg as he went through there, just as we were looking at it. There was a tight thing, so I think Nigel Mansell has put himself into third position just while we were saying that. But you can see the black car there, the John Player Special, that belonged, and here's a replay of it. You see Senna on the left-hand side, he's passing Mark Sura, but the car on the right-hand side is a back marker, Mark Sura, but it's up further you should be seeing there. And in fact, what happened was that Nigel Mansell simply bombed past with the superior power of that Honda engine and the Williams car, and he's got himself now tucked in behind his teammate Nelson Piquet. So the Williams are now second and third. Back to your question about the Spanish Grand Prix. It certainly has had a long and happy history, but it has not been held for some 5 years now. It's a race that used to take place in Madrid, and in fact used to flip-flop between Madrid and the Jarama circuit and Montjuic in Barcelona. I won the race 3 years in the trot, I think it was, 69, 70, and 71. And at that time, it seemed to be on a high. There was a big awareness in Spain for Grand Prix motor racing. Since then, I think it has lagged away a long way, and I think the economic problems of the country, etc., somehow or other, the event just never did take place. And it's only in the development of this new facility here in Jerez that we see the Spanish Grand Prix coming back on to the calendar.
Well, in addition to Jackie Stewart, 2 other drivers have multiple wins, 2 here in Spain. Emerson Fittipaldi, winner in 1972 and 73, and Mario Andretti in 1977 and 78. But really, some of the greatest drivers in the history of the motorsport have won here. The great Fangio, Mike Hawthorne, Graham Hill, Niki Lauda, Jochen Mass, James Hunt, another former world champion, Depailler, and Villeneuve. All those people have won here in Spain.
You see the leaderboard: Senna, Piquet, Mansell, Rosberg, Prost, and Jacques Lafitte, of course, has displaced his own teammate René Arnoux, who was having that electrical problem. So the oldest race driver in the race, Jacques Lafitte, has got himself up to a very happy position of being in the World Championship points, which of course would give him 1 point. It's good to think that we at ESPN are giving you this coverage at a more comfortable hour for all of you, whether you're in the East Coast at Brights Crossing or Durham, South Carolina, whether you're out in California or anywhere else for that matter. At least you can watch it at a time that's just a wee bit better for the old sleepy eyes.
Very true, Jackie. As a matter of fact, talking about places around America, the terrain here, I was trying to get a good handle as to, does it remind me of any state in the country? And it really does, and it probably comes most close to like South Carolina, except there are very few tall trees around here. It's been unseasonably cold, so we couldn't get a good handle on it this week. Just what is the climate normally like in Spain?
Well, we've got, of course, they say the rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain, but it's been quite dry here, although Madrid just yesterday, and there's the Barclay Arrows, the UF&G engine car. It looks uncomfortable. That's Boutsen, Terry Boutsen's in the pits, and he, of course, was running very nicely. So he was up into 10th position, and they've run into problems there. It looks like an engine problem. They're looking behind the rear wheel, however, so it could be that he's been uncomfortable in some way with the rear end of the car. As we look at our other monitors, we know that he's in the pits, and from high on our helicopter shot, we see that Nelson Piquet is still within range. Our Spanish director has been very ardent in following the leader.
Well, Nelson Piquet, as he came into this season, was someone that most everybody was looking at as the odds-on favorite to be the world champion. He did disappoint by winning the first race in Brazil. Jackie talked to him.
Now, what about the season ahead? Here you have the first race in the calendar in Europe. It's a new circuit. How do you feel that the car and yourself are going to adapt? Is it an optimistic season for you, standing as you do now at the beginning of that season?
Well, the team is very good, and we have a very good car in the moment. I think you need a little bit of patience, make a lot of points, and wait for the end of the season, the last 7 races, to really see the chance to win the championship or not. In the moment now, I have to keep doing well, be patient, score points, and wait for the end of the season to really see the possibilities.
Were you suggesting it's a tactical season for you? Surely you want to win every Grand Prix.
I don't think so. It'll be not easy. A lot of competition today in Formula One, and I don't think you can go and win a lot of Grand Prix.
Nelson Piquet, while we were away there, incidentally, has just been passed by his own teammate, Nigel Mansell, who had obviously turned the boost up, got a lot of squirts going up the front stretch, and did him under braking. As we say that, Patrick Tambay has come back in with the Haas Lola, and they've had a wheel change as well as some other adjustments being made. The Goodyear runners had decided they didn't need any tyre changes, so I think that's just been a precautionary tyre change when some other adjustments might have been made. But Nelson Piquet, he said that it's going to be a tactical year for him. He is by far the most intelligent driver in the business right now, and I would personally put him as the best Grand Prix driver in the world right now. He may not be the world champion, he has won that title twice, but he's very smooth, very accurate, very clean. That there is Nigel Mansell, the Englishman, who's won 2 Grand Prix. He won them back-to-back last year, the European Grand Prix of Brands Hatch. He went on to win the Grand Prix of South Africa. So therefore, he's doing well. But the man in the lead is still Ayrton Senna from Brazil, and we'll be right back.
As we come back, Alain Prost, the reigning world champion, has picked up a position, and at the expense of a teammate.
Well, he did pass Keke Rosberg very cleanly under braking. There was a little doubt in Keke's mind at one moment whether he was going to let him through, and I think his brain jarred in, and he realized that it was his own teammate, and he had to behave himself. Otherwise, I think he might have retaliated. But I did think that Piquet was dropping back a little bit. Senna certainly has been able to draw away, and that is not Senna, that's Johnny Dumfries you're looking at right now, the young Scotsman who in fact is the Earl of Dumfries. He doesn't like to be called by his correct title. He likes to be just called plain Johnny. But Johnny Dumfries, he is performing well today. He's got himself into 9th position, and that is the man who's leading this race. That is Ayrton Senna in the vividly yellow helmet, with, of course, the John Player Special black on the Lotus chassis with a Renault engine. And he seems, in my mind, certainly to have pulled away on the track, because right there is the car, and there he is there. Now let's have a look and see where we are. That's Senna there. There is Mansell, but Piquet has dropped off quite a lot. Now, whether this is the tactics that he spoke about a few minutes ago in regards to his interview, or whether he's got a problem, we'll have to speculate.
Well, Nigel is the only driver who has been even able able to seemingly keep pace as we go back and look at Dumfries again. By the way, as we look at this replay of Ayrton putting a lap on Patrick Tambay, talking about helmets, you know, you call that bright, vivid yellow. You know, back in America, we call that chartreuse, and it's really too bad because if you're home watching, you don't get the full effect of Ayrton's helmet. It's really a very vibrant helmet, and it's the same way with the McLaren cars. They're painted that rocket red, the same as Emerson Fittipaldi's race car in America. And if you're watching at home, it just looks like plain old red, but it's really a lot brighter than that.
Well, that helmet's getting a lot of play also with the helmet, of course, of Johnny Dumfries, who is coming up to lap, in fact. Johnny Dumfries, as I told you, was the Earl of Dumfries, and here he moves over very cleanly like any good gentleman and teammate would to allow the king to pass. Now, the Earl of Dumfries, let's just go through it. Of course, it's the royal family in Britain, and they're kings and princesses.
Now, wait a minute, Jackie. How long does this take?
Then you come to dukes, and then after dukes, you have earls and viscounts and lords. So the Earl of Dumfries, in fact, is quite a high title to have in the British aristocracy.
Boy, it makes me embarrassed just to be a noober. Anyway, there's the short shoot. Remember, this is a 2.6-mile course. It's 4.2 kilometers. This is the first quarter of the racetrack. We just came out of turns 2, turns 3. There's turn 4, the big sweeper. We go 16 turns altogether. Coming up in about 4 or 5 seconds here, you will see a quick chicane, left to right-hander. They are about halfway through the course. Right there is the chicane. They're about halfway through the course at this point. We're going to the back half of the course. There will be a real sharp right-hander coming up. That's turn number 9. Then it goes through 3 turns, and then coming out of turn 13 is a section of this racetrack that's about, a half of a mile in length. And even though it's not a straightaway, it's one of the fastest sections on this racetrack. There is the leader, Ayrton Senna, right now, moving through that section of the race course. Turn number 12 and 13. This is getting very close now to the back of the pit.
Incidentally, it looks now that, in fact, Nelson Piquet has been passed by Alain Prost. Now, that's a very significant factor. Alain Prost, it would seem, on the back end, not shown by our Spanish friends in television, but it's certainly the case. And look at Nigel Mansell. He's right up behind Ayrton Senna. He's really in a situation where if he turns up his boost coming down this main street, and remember, they had their run together at the Brazilian Grand Prix where Ayrton Senna closed the door on him, he feels, and took him off the track. Now, before the race, in fact, Nigel Mansell told me that he had officially protested to FISA, the governing body of the sport, about Senna's behavior. And FISA, he says, have announced that if Ayrton Senna does this again, he will be put in front of a tribunal and then some action could be taken. That's Ligier. That's Jacques Lafitte. He's been in for tires. He stalled his engine. Jacques Lafitte, no, he's got it started again. A lucky boy, because normally when these turbocharged engines stall, it's very difficult with all that temperature to get them going again. He had himself up there in 6th position, so that was a costly stop.
I told you a little earlier that Jackie Stewart has won 3 times here at the Spanish Grand Prix. Not at this course, but he's a 3-time winner, 1969, 70, 71. The other 2 double winners of this race are current stars on the IndyCar trail, Emerson Fittipaldi and Mario Andretti. And the last name you see there is a name that perhaps you're not familiar with, and he was the winner back in 1928 and 1933, Louis Chiron. He was the man who won here. He's the first double winner of this race. One more facet of this battle that's coming up, and now Mansell's taking a look to the inside of Senna. Can he pull it off? No, he thinks better of it. Before the race, Jackie, with Nigel sitting in his car, suited up, strapped in with the helmet on, Ayrton was leaning on the side pod. They were having a conversation. Ayrton obviously wanted to establish some type of contact before this race began with Nigel. So there's something going on there.
I would rather think he was speaking to him about the fact that Mansell hadn't made an official protest to FISA. And I should think Senna was saying, while did you do that? That's basically what I think happened, because I think Senna thinks that he was right in Brazil and that Nigel Mansell was wrong. And there you see Rennie, who had electrical problems early. Rennie Arnoux was leading Lafitte on the road, and then had to come into the pits with electrical trouble. He's got his hand in the air, as you saw a few moments ago, so he's got obviously a recurring problem. But it is fair to say that this is a very interesting little battle. It now does seem that Senna has maybe turned his boost up a little bit. That's to say, these turbocharged engines, just by the turn of the hand, you can just inject about 50 or even 100 or more horsepower in. Of course, you use more fuel when that happens, but if someone's getting uncomfortably close to you, you can get away from them. But it is fair to say, now this is the slowest part of the racetrack, leading on to the pit straight. Now, if he's going to pass him, he's going to pass him here. He's turned his boost. He'll try and get up the inside. He'll do it. He'll do it. He's done it. He's done it. Nigel Mansell takes the lead of this Tio Pepe Spanish Grand Prix from Ayrton Senna. He's accelerating away now. Senna, will he be able to hold on to him? Will Nigel Mansell? And here you see the replay again. This time there was no question. He boxed them in because the car in front wouldn't allow Senna to retaliate.
Not only did he box him in, Jackie, but it looked like he did that with much more authority than the move he tried to pull off at Brazil. You commented about that move shortly after it occurred when Nigel's teammate Alain Prost made the pass. Now we've got somebody else off. What looks like it's Nelson Piquet. Nelson Piquet.
I think you'll find the turbo's gone on fire. He dropped back considerably. It looks like Piquet, his helmet, he's walking around there slowly. The fire marshal's being probably a little bit enthusiastic. He's saying no more foam, please. So there is Nelson Piquet, the leader of this year's World Championship, only after one Grand Prix. A man who was going to use tactics for this season has been let down by, obviously, the car exploding engine-wise. That's just terminology in racing. It would more likely be just a turbocharged engine that went wrong. But it is Nelson Piquet as he's walking there. He's not going to drive that one any further, you can be sure of that. But his own teammate now, and Frank Williams, who was so terribly paralyzed in a road accident about 5 or 6 weeks ago, lies in the London hospital watching television, specially piped in by the BBC to be live, and it must please him greatly to think that his team, if his leader has dropped out, at least the second man in this team is now leading the race.
Technology in racing around the world has become so specialized, and that is certainly very true in Formula One racing, where you're not allowed to buy and sell cars. If you want to race, you got to build your own cars, work with your own computers, and come up with your own technology. And John Bisignano had a chance to look at just that.
Some of our more knowledgeable viewers may be wondering what something that looks like a brake duct cooling system is doing in the middle of the side pod. Well, some teams have gone to this system to actually try and cool the turbocharger. It's a ram air effect that lets fresh air come through this duct down to the turbocharger. Now, with the tremendous heat that these little units build up, anything they can do to reduce that temperature adds a great amount of life to both the turbocharger and the engine.
Well, this is Jackie Stewart and Larry Nuber back at the Grand Prix of Spain. That, of course, was John Bisignano. And that man walking away there is Nelson Piquet. John Bisignano still working with us at ESPN, so we're still a strong team bringing you those races from across the seas. We'll be right back for more coverage of the Grand Prix of Spain.
On Monday, April 14th on ESPN at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, the best of college baseball, Kentucky versus Auburn. You know, Bo Jackson is no longer with the Auburn Tigers. The question is, how much will they miss him? In his last 5 games, you know, he hit 4 home runs. You'll find that answer on college baseball on ESPN, Kentucky versus Auburn, Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Live.
So, there's the leader of this Grand Prix of Spain as we see it at the present time. That man is Nigel Mansell of England, and he is now drawing away from Ayrton Senna driving the John Player Lotus, who is being followed by the Marlboro McLaren of Alain Prost. Now, these guys are certainly still very, and there's a USFG arrow. He's out of the car. He's pulled it away. It's Mark Surer, so he's out. he's not going to be in business anymore as we continue to look after this Williams car with his Honda engine. One of the Gitan cars in the pits. That there must be Jacques Lafitte, and Jacques Lafitte, of course, was up into 5th position. He's been in the pits, and he's getting out. We look from our commentary position, and we look down there, and we see Jacques Lafitte stepping out of his car. Very disappointing after a good showing of this team, and there you see the mechanics rather dejectedly putting away their air hoses for any future wheel changes that certainly won't be taking place today.
That's the second Ligier to drop out, Jackie. René Arnoux, who was running with his teammates very competitively, threatening for the top 6, had a gearbox problem a little earlier, and he also dropped out. Jackie, the Williams team, if they win this one, it's 5 in a row over the last 2 years, 3 different drivers.
Very impressive. The team itself is well put together. It's well financed. It's got the right power plant at the present time with the Honda. They've had good financial support from their sponsors. Frank Williams, who masterminded this, I remind everybody again, is hopelessly ill at the present time in the London hospital, paralyzed almost from the shoulders down, and we all, I'm sure, wish him success in trying to regain some of the movement of his body. But it's he who has brought this sort of success into the picture. Ayrton Senna, of course, is a serious threat still in this race. We can't expect that man to be left out of it, and neither could you expect the 2 McLarens to be left out. Alain Prost, I would say, is the second best driver in the world at the present time, and Keke Rosberg, who incidentally is running his 100th Grand Prix this weekend. This day will be his 100th Grand Prix. He's won 5 of them, not a tremendously good batting average, but one of the Data General cars is in, and that unfortunately is Martin Brundle. Martin Brundle had taken that car. We're looking down from our high position here in our commentary, and I'm afraid Martin Brundle's got himself up into 6th position, and he's had an engine go on him. Roger Hill, one of my mechanics who won 3 world championships for me, I'm looking down on him as he examines what might be wrong. I knew they were having lubrication problems. They say they were running short of oil in those Renault engines earlier. I fear that might have been the trouble.
Remember that Martin had given that car a very good ride in Brazil. There it is again. He finished 5th position in Brazil. Nigel Mansell, who you're looking at right now, continues to lead this race. And by the way, the other Ligier is Jacques Lafitte, also a gearbox problem. So both cars, both under the Guy Ligier stable, they are both out for the very same reason. We are more than halfway at the Spanish Grand Prix of 1986. Right now, it's beginning to look like Nigel Mansell, but Ayrton Senna is still well within striking distance. Nigel Mansell continues to lead this race here in Spain, a country that has been very important, influential, and strategic in the history of the world. Early explorers, people like Juan Pizarro and Cortez, who moved to the new land shortly after Americas were discovered, conquered some of the most wealthy and yet maybe perhaps some of the most naive Indians or natives of the Americas, and brought back untold riches to their native country. And Jackie, it was very interesting that in talking to the Spaniards here, those people were portrayed as national heroes. And as I was growing up in high school, they looked at people like Cortez and Pizarro almost as marauders, invaders, pirates almost. And the Spaniard children here are given an altogether different complexion. Who's to say what's right? Meanwhile, back here at this race, tires. Going to go to the distance?
I think the Goodyear runners look like they're going to go the distance without much trouble at all. There's this great tire war between Pirelli and Goodyear. They both bring around the same number of people to each race. There's about 9 tire engineers come over from Akron. There's about 14 other fitters, and that's about the same as come up from Italy with Pirelli. They're very evenly matched. There's more Goodyear runners because there's more teams running in Goodyear than there are Pirelli. But certainly it seemed that both tire makers were expecting to go the full distance with regards to tire wear. With a brand new circuit, it's always very difficult to know how the circuit itself is going to behave. Also, an element in this is temperature. Very cool temperatures, unseasonably cool for this part of the world at this time of year, and that has certainly played a part of the tire technology. And one of the the Benettons as we speak, incidentally, and that's Berger, who's come into the pits, who's been lying in 5th position, and he, of course, is in Pirellis, and he was in for a tire change, just as I was speaking about the fact that the Goodyear runners had decided to do the full distance. Berger has come in and changed tires. So he must have been getting a little slippery out there and found that he would better compete with new rubber on. So he's come in. He probably hasn't lost a place by it. So that'll be interesting to see if he can hold his position.
Gerhard Berger is for real. Again, looking at Nigel Mansell. Berger was in the top 10 in practice and qualifying all week. He started this race in 7th position. He finished 6th at Rio 3 weeks ago. He's running in the points again. Gerhard Berger is looking very strong. We have completed 46 laps of a 72-lap race, and here's the rundown of the people who are still on the track. Mansell, Senna, and Prost. We talked about the three of them. Keke Rosberg holds 4th, in 4th. Berger, Jackie predicted he will hold on to 5th position. Now we see he has dropped down to 6th behind Johnny Dumfries. Teo Fabi, a familiar name to many Americans, is in 7th. Terry Boutsen is 8th. Patrick Tambay holding on in 9th position. Martin Brundle, who dropped out of the race, was being shown in 10th position. Jacques Lafitte, who was being shown in 11th position, is out of the race. Piquet is out, and I think that Mark Schur has also dropped out. Those made up the remainder of the first 13 cars. Jackie, I think we're down to 8 or 9 cars still on this track.
Yes, there's an aerial view of this great new complex. You can see the sand is very fresh. There's very little grass been growing there yet, and it'll take a few years before it looks a little more lived in, but it looks like we've only got 8 runners. Now, transmission has been quite a problem in this racetrack because there's a lot of very heavy acceleration through this type of course, and we broke several transmissions in practice. BMW, for example, had brought along 5 fully prepared and fully mounted gearboxes anticipating problems. They had brought along, by the way, 14 engines as well. The top of the pile with regards to spare engines. People like the Arrows team had 9, as did Benetton have 9. The BMW runners tend to have more backup engines than anybody else. Ferrari usually only have 6 engines, and the Renault runners usually have about 8 engines in hand. The Hondas are fairly well handled. They bring a lot. They bring more men than they do engines, because they bring about 15 Japanese gentlemen to look after the engine and the engine alone. So it's certainly amusing statistics in the Grand Prix field today.
Yeah, Jackie, it's really interesting talking about those Japanese mechanics. That's another view that Americans don't get to see about the world racing scene. And until you've seen it yourself for the first time, you can't really understand what it's like to see a large number of Japanese swarming all over the car. You know that they don't speak the language all that well, but boy, are they good on these engines. These Honda engines are really working well. It's what carted the Williams cars to those wins at the end of last year. It's what carted the Williams car to the win at Rio. And it looks like Nigel Mansell may be taken to another win here in Spain.
Historically, Grand Prix racing cars have been low. They've been slick for streamlining. And of course, that is to allow the car to penetrate the air at high speed with the minimum resistance. So dimensions are very important when a designer creates such a car. To the top of that screen is only 30 inches. To the top of this engine here is only 35 inches. To this radiator cowling, it's a mere 21 inches. Now, you may say that is very low. This USF&G Barclay Arrows is one of the leaders in Grand Prix racing at the present time. But there's a new breed arriving. Is this low enough? The arrival of the Olivetti Brabham could well have made every other Grand Prix car obsolete, because this car here, in its overall height, is no less than 10 inches lower than the USF&G Arrow that you just saw. The driver lies down to drive in that car. The scuttle there, right there, is 5 inches lower in this car than the Arrows. It's 2.5 inches lower here. The car is literally knee height. And that's going to allow this Brabham to penetrate the air that much faster. The frontal area, if you could think of Concorde, is that much sharper, that much slicker, and hopefully in the eyes of Gordon Murray, the creator and designer, is going to allow the car to have a much higher front straightaway speed. Only time will tell, and of course success. if this is going to be the state of the art for the future.
Well, the Brabham car, of course, has had a little bit of trouble today. None of them are running as we speak to you now, but whether that car will be the revolution that it looked like it might be when Gordon Murray announced it, there was a great big flag flying here during practice saying, Gordon Murray is God, because he keeps coming out with new creations, I guess. Whether this creation is going to produce the success that he dreamt, I'm not quite sure. But at the moment, it's certainly not as competitive as a lot of people anticipated.
The replay which you just saw was Nigel Mansell continues to lead this race, getting down into the final third of the event, putting a lap on Patrick Tambay, the American creation. The Carl Haas team is still on the track. He's running slower than all the other cars on the speedway right now, but Tambay is being shown in 9th position. As Nigel leads, I keep seeing that yellow. There it is. Senna is moving in.
Well, he was 4 seconds behind there, 3.9 seconds in fact, but it looks since that was taken that maybe, certainly I would say, or looking at it, that Senna's closing up on Nigel. It's Keke Rosberg. It's now 1.77 seconds in our stopwatch here from our commentary position. Our director tells us, so therefore we're in good shape. But nevertheless, it's 21 laps to go in this race. Incidentally, Keke Rosberg was dropping back rapidly. It looks like he has a problem of some kind, so he no longer is in contention. Of course, Alain Prost is, and from time to time when we look down that front straight from our first camera position, we can see the Marlboro McLaren car coming into picture, and look how close, and there's the Marlboro McLaren just coming round. So the first 3 cars, I would say, are only spread by about 4 seconds, and that's not very much with this number of laps still to run.
An indication that perhaps Nigel is slowing. By the way, as we anticipate the setup here of this tremendous duel for the lead, just a word about Spanish Grand Prix drivers. Jackie, it surprises me that so many Spaniards in the history of the world have been so adventuresome. All those explorers that we were talking about, they helped to open up, make this truly a global world. But we only saw like 3 or 4 of them in the Grand Prix yearbook, or Grand Prix history book. Not very many Spaniards have ever turned to Grand Prix racing.
And recently, very few indeed. Velotto is the most recent, Alex Sovaroch just before that, but considering the fact that they made their reputation in modern day, not maybe in the years of the analogs of history, but the modern day with bullfighting, etc., which takes place right here in Seville, just about 50 miles away, I think it is surprising. But of course, it's not a tremendously affluent country. There's not a lot of people with very much money. There are, of course, the very rich, but there's a lot of poor in the past. That's changing, of course, with the democracy here. But I think that needs to change more before we're going to see some Spanish drivers coming along. A lot of Spanish-speaking drivers have done very well from South America, from Argentina, for example, etc. So 1.22 seconds from first to second, and then back 3.66 seconds to Alain Prost. So that's not very much. Prost is a highly intelligent, crafty driver, driving a very well-prepared and well-balanced car. That car has got a great deal of money in it. It's got a great investment in sponsorship. The talent of the driver is very big. We'll have to wait and see how it can perform, because we're going to be right back for more of the Spanish Grand Prix. This is Jackie Stewart and Gary Nuber back at the Grand Prix of Spain in Jerez in the south of Spain. The leader of the race is the car on the right-hand side of your screen is Nigel Mansell of Britain. And then you have Senna, who is just behind him in second position. Then you've got, of course, the reigning world champion, Alain Prost. That's the battle for the lead up there. Johnny Dumfries had passed Keke Rosberg into 4th position, but he's had trouble and he's out. Johnny Dumfries looking at a rear drive shaft. Now, he's broken 2 of those so far in practice. Young driver, new experience to the heavy horsepower of the turbocharger, And I think you'll find that part of that reason for those breakages, frankly, may well be his inexperience. Because when you've got that much power, it's very difficult to progressively apply that power without giving things like drive shafts, universal joints, and couplings an easy time. The man who's leading this race, Nigel Mansell, takes 38 gear changes every lap. The man who's in third position only takes 22 gear changes for the same lap. They are both using 6-speed gearboxes, but Nigel Mansell goes down through the box from 6th to 5th to 3rd to 4th to 3rd to 2nd in the slow corners, so that he is not giving his transmission a hard time. And that's why he is prepared to put that extra work in, because he thinks that it'll give him a better chance of reliability.
The top speed on this racetrack, maybe about 150, 160, 170 miles an hour, maybe at this section of the racetrack. It's actually turns 13, 14, and 15, but because you can go so quickly there, it's almost like the longest straightaway. Here's the slowest one of the racetrack, a hairpin turn going onto the front stretch, past the pit area. This is the longest straightaway and one of the best places to pass. We saw some passing there earlier in the race as Senna chases Nigel, as Prost chases Nigel Mansell. That might be the place where they have an opportunity to get by. This is turn number 2. This is a 16-turn racetrack. As they come along this section, they are approaching what probably could best be resembled to the back straightaway. We're going to go to turn 4, up to turn 5, turn 6, and when there's a chicane, you know they're about halfway through the course at that moment.
Well, we're right now, as you can see, very close together. They're under a second. Look how tight Nigel Mansell is now leading that race from Ayrton Senna. Senna has really closed up on him. Mansell now has to really stay in shape. He's got to have his head absolutely in gear. If he makes one mistake, if he misses a gear shift, if he just goes a little late in braking, and look how that stretched on that straight, that would suggest to me that Nigel Mansell's using more boost, more power. Senna's closing up under braking, so therefore he's getting very tight under braking. But that is slightly confusing in a way, because the Williams has got new carbon fiber double disc brakes. They're twin discs on each of the 4 wheels, and the reason for that was to try and increase the braking benefits to that car. Nigel Mansell, obviously to me, seemed to have a little more power, turned up the boost a little bit and opened that gap. But look how close Prost is also. This is going past the start-finishing line. Senna, the car on the left-hand side of the screen, the flame coming out the back of the Honda engine Williams is on the overrun. There's no danger. And there is the other McLaren car. That's Keke Rosberg, just about to be lapped.
And that is 4th position. That gives you an idea of how much these first 3 cars have dominated this event, moving around this 4.2-kilometer course. 1, 2, and 3 are moving up on Rosberg, and you never know. We have still about 17 laps to go. Will Keke play a role in the winner of this race? They are closing rapidly. Let's see how Keke Rosberg plays this as the 3 leaders come up. They're now moving toward the chicane at turn 7 and turns 8. Oh, and Nigel goes to the inside of Keke and slips through. Oh.
That was indeed a daring move. And look at Prost. He's almost doing Senna because of it. Now, in fact, Keke was a little unethical perhaps there. He could have moved over. He's not in contention. He's obviously got a major problem. He's gone a lot slower. And, of course, he's dropped right back because he only just a few laps ago was up with that group. He's had a mechanical of some kind. But, in fact, he may not have been looking in his mirror, because he could easily have taken Mansell off. Here's this group. Look, he's not out on the left-hand side of the racetrack. He got loose. He got loose. The red and white car there, the McLaren, got loose. So he was taken by surprise. Mansell's through. My goodness, what a thing that would have been if he had been taken out there. And he's opened up his gap just a wee bit. He's about 1.29 seconds ahead. It was under a second, so it's just a hair's breadth, really.
Well, it really simplifies things. The race is down to those 3 cars on your screen that just went down the straightaway, or a stretch of this racetrack, which we say resembles one of the short chutes at Indianapolis. It's almost exactly the same length as turns 1 and turns 2 on this speedway. On this circuit, speedway is not really the absolute correct term to use for a Grand Prix course. Nigel Mansell has got to be driving as much in the mirrors as on the racetrack ahead of him. Mansell is trying to hold back. Ayrton Senna, the Brazilian who performed so well and finished in the runner-up position in his home country in Rio 3 weeks ago, and Alain Prost, the reigning world champion. We're down to the final stages of the Spanish Grand Prix. Ayrton Senna is getting ever so closer to Nigel Mansell, and there is stirring in the Williams pit. Is Nigel Mansell running low on fuel? Is he checking one of the tires? Is he concerned? Is he coming in? There seems to be a lot of activity in the Williams pit.
Well, it looks to me like he's going to get past right now because Senna's really got the pressure on him. It certainly won't be fuel that he's coming in for because he's not allowed to take fuel on. He closed the door very neatly there on Ayrton Senna. He didn't give him any room, but look how close Alain Prost is. If Ayrton Senna passes Nigel Mansell, so also will Alain Prost. This is what you're going to see right here, because if he's got troubles, it will probably because he's just maybe got a tire situation. It could be a slow puncture. It could be that he's heated the tires a wee bit too much. If he's going to come into the pits at all, certainly looking down from our commentary position, the Williams regiment are out there standing at attention. Everything is ready for a pit stop if he needs it. That may only be a precaution by them, not to be taken by surprise. But it does seem to me that Nigel is under a great deal of pressure right now as they come under our commentary position past. It shows to me that, in fact, about one... And look, is he going to do it? He can't do it from there, can he?
Oh, Ayrton Senna stays on the outside.
No, that was really an unnecessary move because Nigel had closed the gap on the inside. Now, I don't necessarily approve of this. He's using road now unconventionally. Look, instead of taking the fast line, staying on the inside of the corner to keep Senna out. Now, Senna locked his wheel. That's the one that's been locking all day, remember. He's out wide in the marbles right now. He could easily, in fact, he got loose. Now, there is Keke Rosberg in the pits.
Keke Rosberg, who is running in fourth position. Remember, one lap down to the 3 leaders. There is first and second. And there is Senna going to the inside. Are they going to come
together? And he's off.
Senna.
He's off. He's spun off.
He stayed
on. He stayed on, but look at this. They're putting his hand up and doing this. Now, the shaking of the fist there was by Nigel Mansell. He put his hand up and shook his fist. Now, that's interesting.
That may have been the return of the favor from Brazil, at least in Nigel Mansell's mind.
I think you're going to see a pass here. It's fairly clear. I don't know if there was any damage done to the front wing of Senna's car. I don't think so. There doesn't seem to be anything out of line, but they certainly looked like they almost came into contact. In the meantime, the old fox, Alain Prost, is sitting at the back there. Now, he could win this race without passing anybody. If these two get themselves off, then Alain Prost would simply inherit this lead.
Jackie, another thing I've seen Prost do is sit in a position like this, seemingly without the capability of passing both cars. Here's Senna once again taking another look at Nigel. Prost will wait, and I've seen him pass 2 cars at speed within 1 lap or within 2 laps. So just because Alain is hanging back, as cagey of a racer as he is, he's probably thinking about, gee, what's going on up in front? I'm just going to be patient because I feel like I have the ability, at least I've shown him in the past, to make these moves at a very quick rate of time.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I chose Prost to win the race before this event, and look at this. He's climbing all over him. Senna's climbing all over him, and Mansell, in the meantime, is not giving him any ground. Nigel's got a problem. He's got a problem. He's not able to keep that performance up at all.
Well, there are 12 laps to go. It seems like it's just impossible to hold back Senna and Prost for 12 laps. Nigel has really slowed the pace.
What you've got to be able to watch here, however, is for Senna, because Alain Prost could get under Senna when Senna's concentrating only on Mansell. So it could easily happen here that Alain Prost will just watch this performance for a few laps, see an opening and take it, because Nigel's going round now an unconventional line, and I rather think that he's having a tire problem. I think he's used up a little more rubber than he would want to have used up, and I think maybe that he's not getting quite the grip he had anticipated. The reason I say that is that he hasn't lost a gear in the transmission because the difference would be too much at one particular pace. Now look where Prost is right now behind Senna.
Alain Prost may be in the best position in this race, seemingly seemingly he is the one who has abused his car the less among the trio that you see on the screen right now. It's beginning to look like that Nigel Mansell has a tire problem. Remember Ayrton Senna, the Lotus Renault's the fuel question. Have they run the fuel down too low? Is Ayrton's attention being diverted from that situation? Is he not paying as much attention to the fuel situation as he should be? Seemingly, Prost, with his great experience and his tremendous ability that he has shown in years past, is in the best position. But this contest right now for first place has got so many implications. And frankly, Jackie, I'm shaking a little bit on my boots. These guys are going after it for seriousness.
Well, there's 11 laps left, so that's not very many. Look how close he is right now. He's tucked in right underneath his aerofoil. He doesn't want to get too close, because if Nigel put on a little bit of brake there, in fact, what would happen is that Senna would run into him and damage that front wing. So this is something he's got to look out for. It's clear that I think Nigel is having more trouble going into corners, which would suggest braking, than he is coming out, because he seems to extend the lead in acceleration. You can see it there. And then as he comes closer to each corner, Senna seems to close up on him. That would suggest either he's really just playing games and conserving fuel. He did admit to me before the beginning of the race that they couldn't put an ounce more fuel into that tank. It was very, very full indeed. Now, it may be that he is concerned about fuel consumption. Keep in mind that they have an on-board computer telling them how many laps that they've got left on the fuel within that tank.
Obviously, we're going to pay attention to this contest for first place. Teo Fabi, by the way, has passed teammate Gerhard Berger and moved into 5th position. Rosberg still runs in 4th. In 7th on the course is Terry Boutsen, and 8th is Patrick Tambay. The only 8 cars still on the circuit, but the only 3 cars in this race are those: Mansell, Senna, Prost. Is this Senna's move? No, not quite enough room. Prost moves up. Senna has to get on the binders hard again. Hits the curb.
I think Nigel is being very bullish on this one. He is very determined, and it couldn't be a more righteous position for him, considering what happened last time. Senna in the replay comes inside. He locks up his brakes. Nigel did not give him any space, and in fact, Senna had to run over the curbs. Now, those curbs I ran over because I drove around this track yesterday, and even in a passenger car.
There's the move. Not on this time.
There's the move. There is the move, and Prost goes through as well, probably. Yep. Prost has done it. Now, that's exactly what I would have expected, because Nigel Mansell was put off his stroke, found in the wrong gear, and a turbo, when you take your foot off the gas, there's a lag before it comes in again, and Nigel Mansell had to stay off the gas, and by doing so, therefore, he wasn't able to get the response from his engine and retaliate not only against Senna, but also against Prost. Now, can Prost pass Senna? That's the big question.
Well, despite all of that concern about how these two guys, Senna in the black car, and Nigel has come in. Nigel Mansell has taken this opportunity to come in for a tire change. Nigel Mansell, who will hold on to 3rd position undoubtedly, because as you saw, Rosberg was a lap, more than a lap behind. Nigel takes the chance. Now that the lead, the potential for the win is probably gone, he moves back out on the track. There's Patrick Tambay. He is the last running of all the cars out on the course. You saw the black car go by with that bright, vibrant, or chartreuse helmet of Ayrton Senna. And there is the leader, who was also the pole sitter of this race, Ayrton Senna.
Well, now, Senna's got quite a cushion. Now, where is Alain Prost in our picture? He did drop back considerably. Senna had been held up considerably by Nigel Mansell, and it was clear to me that Mansell obviously had a tire problem. He couldn't go into the corners very deeply. He was losing grip, and that was because probably he had overheated his tires by driving just a wee bit too aggressively. Senna, in the meantime, had been slowed up, and by them being slowed up, of course, Prost was perhaps a little closer than he might have been, because he hasn't been able to catch up. Senna now has a considerable gap in comfort away from him, and as he comes past, you can see the difference there in the two cars. I'll just give it to you. Yes, it's about a 2 and a bit second advantage that Ayrton Senna has.
You know, in recent years, safety has gotten a lot of attention, particularly on the other side of the Atlantic in Indianapolis cars. And the monocoques, the chassis that are constructed out of carbon fiber have been brought way up to about shoulder height on American cars. And that's the same thing they've done on the Lotus. These cars appear to be one of the safest running in Grand Prix Formula One racing today. The monocoque comes way up to about shoulder height on the driver, plus the nose is one piece that sticks way out, seems to have a much tighter fit. I've seen them without their outer skins on in the pit area during the last 2 races, and I really like the way the Lotuses are built.
Well, we've only got 8 laps to go for Ayrton Senna. I must say that Alain Prost is closing that gap up a wee bit. But whether he can retaliate to the extent that he has to Ayrton Senna is another thing. I think Senna's got something in hand also. So we're looking at a young man coming up here for his 3rd Grand Prix victory. And there you see the order of the day at the moment. Senna, Prost, Mansell, and Rosberg. Rosberg must consider himself rather fortunate to be in 4th position right now. Theo Fabi is 5th, 6th is Gerhard Berger, 7th is Terry Boutsen, and 8th, the only car remaining on the track that's running, is Patrick Tamby. So there's been an incredible amount of attrition today from this starting grid, and that indeed is almost too much from 24 runners.
Jackie, we've got a confirmation of what Nigel Mansell's problem was. There was a slow leak in the right rear tire, and obviously the strategy was, well, Nigel, just hold on as long as you possibly can. And he made some bold and daring moves to hold back really one of the most aggressive drivers in Formula One, if not the most aggressive driver in Formula One racing today, Ayrton Senna. Nigel did his best, but there was just too many laps left in this race.
Well, I've had a slow puncture. I lost the Grand Prix of Argentina one year because of a slow puncture. You know, you pick up a little nail or a little piece of foreign matter on the racetrack, and it doesn't matter whether you're on street tires or racing tires, you can still get that puncture. So clearly that's what must have happened. These tires, you know, when they're cold, are only inflated to a pressure of about 12 pounds per square inch. It's not a very high pressure. If you lose about 2 pounds of pressure, therefore the percentage ratio of loss is much greater than it would be in a street tire that might be inflated to 33 or 32 pounds of pressure. So if it goes down by 2 pounds, the profile of the tire changes completely, and being such a wide tire, it falls down in the middle and it gets concave. Now the racing driver can often see that in his rear view mirror, and he can see the performance of his tire going down by the feel of it, and then of course he can look in reference to his mirror. Now just as I was speaking, they passed the start finishing line, and 5.31 seconds separate the 2 drivers. However, the fastest lap has just been done by Nigel Mansell on a fresh set of tires. They've got now how many laps to go? They've got 6 laps to go. It would be interesting to speculate if Nigel Mansell can catch Alain Prost, because I think that might just be doable.
Well, not only that, Jackie, but to put ourselves inside of Ayrton Senna's helmet seems to me like it would be wiser for him to drive this race watching Alain Prost more than anything else. I'm quite surprised to see him turn the fastest lap of the race at this juncture. I think it's pretty obvious that he is the quickest car on the racetrack. The idea now becomes to finish this race, and it seems to me like he should be driving more with Alain in mind than trying to turn quick laps.
Well, he's 12 seconds ahead of Mansell right now as we look down onto the track. So he doesn't have a problem with Nigel Mansell. What Nigel Mansell has to do is look towards snatching second place from Prost. And keep in mind, this is of course an important race, but it's also an important world championship. And there's a difference between getting 9 points for first, 6 points for second, 4 points for third, 2 points, 3 points for fourth, 2 points for fifth, and 1 point for sixth position. So I think from Nigel Mansell's point of view, he really does want to catch Alain Prost, and He's doing it. Look, there is Nigel Mansell.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I thought that you had said that Senna had turned fastest lap. Nigel Mansell with that brand new set of tires. And point exactly that you made, that Nigel is moving up on Alain. But still, Senna has opened up some distance, and it would seem like it would be his best project right now to drive watching Alain and Nigel as he comes up, rather than try and race his course.
He has, however, closed up 4 seconds from the previous lap. So Nigel Mansell is catching the Senna, the leader, by 4 seconds a lap with 5 laps to go. So that's one big bite of time. Now, whether Senna is just cushioning it now is another matter. But look, there's your battle. There's Alain Prost, the Marlboro McLaren.
Yeah, getting by Alain Prost will be his first big uphill battle.
No, he'll do that clearly because he's got nothing to lose. He can turn up the boost. He can do whatever he likes. He's on fresh rubber. That counts for a lot. He's got cool tires. I prophesy that he will pass Alain Prost. I don't think he will get past Ayrton Senna.
Boy, what a moment of drama that will be should Nigel Mansell catch Ayrton Senna. We've seen how they have taken each other to task in each of the last 2 Grands Prix, and I am sure that Ayrton Senna, the last thing he expected to see once he finally got around Nigel Mansell with the lead, was to see that Williams number 5 coming back in his gears.
He's doing it.
I'll
He's
tell you,
doing it now.
Nigel is coming on strong.
He's making the pass. He's missed the gear change.
Oh.
Hey, missed the gear change. Quite an interesting move there. He got a little excited and he missed the gear change. Now that will not cost him very much here. Now what he wants to do is wait. Calm, Marshall. Nigel has to be very quiet now. He's not going to win this race. It's more important to get second place. So just take your time.
68 laps have been completed. There are 4 laps to go. Actually, 3 laps in about 2/3 of a lap. Again, we're right now moving through turns 3 and 4, working toward 5, 6. They're coming up on the chicane right now. They've come through the chicane. That's turn 7 of a 16-turn course. Turn 8, approaching turn number 9. And remember, it's turns 12, 13, and 14 where you really pick up some speed.
Nigel's getting a wee bit excited, actually, because I saw him there going over some curbstones that he hasn't been going through over earlier. His adrenaline is pumping. He obviously wants to do it, but don't do it at a tight part of the racetrack. Give himself some space. He made a mistake coming onto the main straight where he could have passed back there, and he just chose the wrong place. Let's see where he is right now. And he's done it.
He's done it. He has gotten past. So Nigel Mansell, with 3 laps to go, now sets his sights on Ayrton Senna. It is a matter of how long those brand new tires can hold up. Can Nigel Mansell get it done? Now remember a lap ago when we theorized that he missed that shift. He would have gotten by, perhaps, Alain Prost a whole lap earlier. Had he been able to do that, would he have had just that much more time to catch Ayrton Senna? Was that the difference between him winning and losing this race, or at least catching Ayrton Senna? There you got an idea of the distance. We were watching Ayrton as he came around turn number 4, and Nigel wasn't even in sight yet.
Well, as we passed the commentary position last time, he was 7.24 seconds behind Senna. We'll just be interested to know what happens now, but I rather think that he won't do it. Nevertheless, we have to take our hat off to him. Had he stopped earlier when he recognized the slow puncture, he would probably have had the opportunity of a longer period of catch-up. But of course, hindsight with 20/20 vision is a very easy thing to speculate on. I have to take my hat off to him. He's driven a hard, purposeful race. Ayrton Senna, on the other hand, you could hardly fault what he's done. He's been smooth, he's been clean. But keep in mind, back in America, this race isn't yet over. Fuel consumption still has a potential to play. And look, that was the difference. You saw that just a moment ago. It could be that we are not over yet. Because if he runs low on fuel, the first thing that will happen is that the fuel will slosh from one side of the... And look, he caught 2 seconds on that last lap.
2 laps to go. Very interesting. Nigel Mansell still has a chance. It's extremely outside. Here comes 3rd place Alain Prost. You can see the discoloration, by the way, on the nose of that car. That car is snow white. You can see that there is a lot of oil on this surface.
He can technically do it in 2 laps, but I think you'll find that Senna has now turned up the boost a little bit, and I think you'll see a slightly faster lap time coming out of him. It rather depends on whether this car in front of him moves over and gives him plenty of space. The car he's about to lap in a few corners' time. If that car holds him up in any way, then he could get flustered and start doing errors. But he's not using all the road right now, which is a good sign. He's keeping his cool. This is where a young driver with such maturity starts showing his true mettle. The fact that he's not getting that excited, but be sure that he's getting all of the signals from the pits that he needs. There's Nigel Mansell. He's really closing up. He's tightening this up. This race is not over.
The drivers here outdistance the computer. You can see Ayrton has gotten around Terry Boutsen in the arrows and put Terry between himself and Alain. The drivers here have, or rather Nigel, I'm sorry, the drivers here have outdistanced the computer by about 30 to 35 kilometers per hour. They went that much faster than what the computer said that they should go.
Well, I think that Nigel Mansell could win this race with 1 lap to go. There is 1 lap to go, and he is now 1.78 seconds behind, and there the two of them.
Visually closing in.
This is one of the most impressive Grand Prix that we've had in the calendar for a very long time. It's possible that he'll pass Senna, but I don't think Senna's going to be moving over and letting him through very easily. An enormous crowd of people now growing around the rostrum where the checkered flag is shown. The Lotus people are out on the pit wall like they're going to eat it. And the Williams people are not exactly sitting in the back of the garage area either. Look at how close they are. What a performance.
They're about 1.5 miles to go now, Jackie. Bring them around. Senna leading and Nigel Mansell in second.
Now you have really a war of nerves. Now Senna was a little wide on that corner. He missed his apex. Slow corner now. Accelerating away in 3rd gear out of there into 4th gear. Nigel's getting very close. Senna will start using road very soon that Nigel doesn't want him to use to block him naturally. They're down to 0.44 of a second as we look out over the racetrack.
Last part of the course coming up on turn 16. Nigel just does not have enough time.
Well, wait a minute. There's a lot of power in that Honda. He's going to weave down the straight. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. My God, did he do it? We can't tell. We can't tell. It didn't look like it to me. It looks like Ayrton Senna has won the Tío Pepe Spanish Grand Prix. They're looking at each other. They're nodding. It's a fair race. It was an honest race. You couldn't have had anything closer than that. The few people that have turned out to see this race live in Spain have been treated to an extraordinary demonstration of Grand Prix racing. I can't remember a better finish in a more spectacular fashion in any Grand Prix that I've seen, I don't think ever.
Well, Nigel Mansell is a driver who doesn't get as much attention, doesn't get as many plaudits as perhaps the other 5 or 6 drivers right at the upper crust of Formula One racing. But no driver drove a better race without question today than the number 5 car of Nigel Mansell.
Well, that just shows you that the official result has been given by the organizers. It was 1.4 seconds, I think, of difference, 0.1, whatever it is. It's a very small difference.
It was about a half a car length.
And there's Senna, Mansell, Prost, and Rosberg have finished this Grand Prix. Very impressive indeed. And there you see Ayrton Senna going around with some relief, I can tell you. I wonder if he really knows that he's won it. I suppose he does.
I'm sure that he does. By the way, Teo Fabi held on for 5th position.
There's the replay. Look at it coming up here. And after they cross the finishing line, you see that Nigel Mansell is ahead. In fact, he had that momentum going, but he just didn't have it on early enough. There simply wasn't enough road from that second gear hairpin right up to the finishing line. But what a spectacular finish.
The winner for the first time in 1986, it's only the second race, Ayrton Senna. Nigel Mansell with that challenging second. Reigning world champion Alain Prost is in 3rd. In the finish, Keke Rosberg, here's that finish again, is 4th. Teo Fabi is 5th. And the final points position to Gerhard Berger as the Benetton cars get 2-point position. the first time in about a month, as you look closely at Ayrton Senna, that we've seen Senna and Nigel Mansell standing side by side, and maybe not necessarily smiling because the anthem is playing now, but very satisfied.
It is indeed. You've seen three men up there who have today performed a very, very good professional job at driving cars. Nigel Mansell is unquestionably the hero of the day. Came into the pits, got tires, and went back out again. He's a tired man. Ayrton Senna was nursing his right arm. He's obviously in pain with that right arm. Alain Prost looks almost as fit as when he started. The national anthem of Great Britain now being played because it is, of course, the entrance national anthem that should always be played. They did, in fact, play the Brazilian national anthem first, which indeed is an error. But there the flags are being raised from Brazil, the United Kingdom, of course. The flag is there along with the French flag. There you see the Spanish flag right there. But if we were to look back at what this race has provided, I think it is something very special. Senna did lead from the very beginning, and in a way we're looking now at a replay, and this is the final few yards, and it was right there that that race was won or lost. It was less than half a car length in distance. There's been a few close ones. Elio De Angeli and Keke Rosberg did it in Austria. John Bizignano pointed out to me. In Monza one year, I had a very close call with Jochen Rindt, where I think the distance was something like 18 inches between my car nose and that of Jochen's for me to win the Grand Prix of Italy. So there has been close finishes, but this in fact was tremendously exciting because the right men were going to win the race, whether it was Mansell or whether indeed it was Senna. It could have gone either way, and the crowd would have been equally pleased.
Well, Ayrton Senna is, of course, the new points leader of the World Championship. The top six finishers, Senna, Mansell, Prost, Rosberg, Fabi, nosing out his teammate Gerhard Berger for sixth position. Today's Spanish Grand Prix of Formula One has been brought to you by Diet Coke. You're going to drink it just for the taste of it. And by B.F. Goodrich TA Radio, built for you to take on the road. Thank you so much for joining us from Spain. We hope you enjoyed our broadcast. ESPN will be with you for all of the 1986 Formula One season. And, of course, we'll be giving you extensive coverage of stateside kart, IndyCar racing, and Grand National Stock Car racing in the South. So until the next time, for John Bizignano and Jackie Stewart, this is Larry Nuber saying so long, everyone.